Hi.
Hi, Jimmy. Thank you very much for giving me opportunity to interview you for my YouTube channel and my podcast.
You're more than welcome, and I'm sorry it's taken us so long to catch up. That's
Yeah,
just a reflection of busy schedules, really, because I know we've been trying to connect for some time. So I'm glad we finally got a chance to connect, and I'm sorry it's taken so long.
yeah. I have gone through a profile. I can see you have done a lot of work and also involved in a lot of roles. So I thought to tell about your work to my audience. So can you please introduce yourself to my audience?
Yeah, happy to, and thanks for the invite as well. So I really appreciate it because I do follow your channel, and I think your work is great, and I particularly love that had your mother on the channel twice as well, and that she's made a contribution. That's really nice. So I really like your values and what you do. So I'm Jamie. I've got a number of different responsibilities. So I'm on a number of different organisations that I help to run. I've got a long background in education, so everything that I've done over about 30 years has something to do with education. So I've worked in schools, I've worked in colleges, I've worked in universities, and I'm also an entrepreneur. So I've got an ownership interest in a number of companies as well. So I've started some very small companies, and I've also helped them to grow to become a lot bigger. These days, today, I'm on about 6 different boards. So I'm on the board of a fabulous university in the UK called Staffordshire University, which is a very digitally progressive university. Has the best games department in the world, and produces more games graduates for the gaming industry more than any other university in the world. So it's a very special place. I'm also a director of a large chain of schools in the UK as well. So I'm a director of a whole number of schools. I'm also on the board of a military charity that raises lots of money for army cadets and to help to transform their lives. And I hold a number of board positions on companies as well. So I've got a bunch of commercial businesses as well, and those are all the main reasons why it's taken us so long to catch up. Yeah, so that's
So
kind of what I do.
you have your own company as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So which is about.
So I've got a couple of companies that I have an ownership interest in myself as well. So one of them is a safeguarding platform. So that's called Safeguarding 24. And what Safeguarding 24 does, that was co-founded with my business partner, Neil King. Neil King is a very talented games developer and software developer, and he helps to develop platforms that do different things. And so we developed a safeguarding platform for educators so that they could use this platform to help to keep people safe and secure when using online tools. And that platform, Safeguarding 24, is now used all over the world. It's used by United World Colleges in Norway and different countries all over the place. So that's a great platform, and I'm also on different commercial boards as well, and a couple of other companies as well. So, but all of my main interests have tended to be to do with education.
So, can you tell me what made you to involve in everything, like starting from education, your director, and your
Yeah,
taking the
sure.
responsibility of the schools?
Yeah, so the passion and interest in education comes from my childhood, I suppose. So I was not very lucky as a child, and I was in a position of relative poverty in the UK, and some quite sort of challenging circumstances. And basically, cutting a long story short, it was education that transformed my life. So the chances it gave me, the skills, the knowledge, the networks it opened up for me. I realized that in education, I was surrounded by people who believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. And they were willing to invest in me, even though they stood to gain nothing from it. And it just changed my life completely. So I did well in education. I then went to college and to university. I then went back to university, did an MBA, a master's degree in business, and then I sort of went back again last year because I was absolutely honoured because I had the title of honorary doctor bestowed on me by Staffordshire University in recognition of my contribution as a digital disruptor, they called me, for all things digital. So I am incredibly protective of education. I know it's often said, and there's a famous quote by a very fine person who said that education is the most powerful weapon to change the world. It's the most powerful force for positive change, and I really believe that. Because I'm an example of it. Because my life chances would have been quite limited, but it was education that really enabled me to have some fantastic adventures and to go on and do some really amazing things. And I'm a very, very lucky person these days. I don't really feel like I've got a job. I just do what I love every day. I get to spend my time with extraordinary people, get to connect with amazing people, and get to have a lot of fun. And I think that life is very precious and very short. So I think we should all make the most of the present moment, and that's what I try to do every day, basically. But I'm very, very grateful for the opportunities that I've had, which have all come from education.
So you have involved in the businesses and your background is completely education. So how do you interconnect education with the business?
So my business interests have mainly been to do with education technology. So, for example, I'm the chairman of one of Google's leading education partners, and um, that combines all of my passions come together because I'm passionate about education. I have a fascination for technology, which I've always had since I was a child, because I remember the first time I saw a computer and I just thought it was like magic. I thought, wow, what can I get this to do? I started to wonder how I could program it and get it to do things. And those sort of twin elements of education and technology and computers has always been a fascination for me. And really, if you think about it, education is all about people and all about the potential of all of us. And I think that education is really the most important thing in the world, because all of our collective hopes, no matter what country we live in or what society we're part of, all of our collective hopes as a human race across this planet is reliant on education. And education offers us our best hope for a better global future. And I just happen to think that technology is a really good part of that as well, because I think if people are equipped with the right digital skills, then they can really thrive in this digital age that we're in. And I think I'm very, very passionate about helping people to realize their potential and to do things they didn't think they could do, which is pretty much what I spend my professional life doing. I spend most of my working days these days with quite influential people in positions of authority, usually chief executives or those kind of people. And I help them to do things they didn't think they could do, either with technology or with cultural transformation and other things. And that's just a joy. I get to spend my time with remarkable people doing remarkable things. So throughout my whole career, the common elements have always been technology and people and education. And that's a great place to be, because the people who work in education are just the most joyful, awesome, inspiring people that you could ever spend your time around. So I never take that for granted. It's a huge privilege.
And how you are able to be adaptable to all the things that you're doing?
Adaptable. Well, again, I think that comes from education. I've been really lucky because I've always had a lot of incredible people around me that I can learn from. There's an old quote that says, if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room. Well, fortunately, I am never the smartest person in the room. So I am always surrounded by people I can learn from. And I think if you do that, you tend to float upwards a bit. You tend to pick up on some of their sort of knowledge and experience and wisdom. I've certainly encouraged my children to do that, and to always to surround themselves with people that they can learn from, who might be very different to them. They might have different perspectives, but that's great because you can learn from that. So one of the things I've got that's enabled me to adapt to all the different things I do is that open-mindedness, that always learning mindset that I've got from education, because I think we only really start to age when we stop learning. I think as long as we're always learning, you see, I'm always future facing because I'm always fascinated by where things are going. Because one of my many things I've done is I'm an investor. So I published a book some years ago called Making Money from Stocks and Shares. And that did quite well. And that was all just about explaining to people who might not be from a business background or might not have much money. But I explained to people in the book how you don't need much money and you don't need to be from a business background to do very well with investing on the stock market. You just need to do some quite basic things really, but to just to do that. And when I look at all of these sort of things that I've done, I owe it all to education, because if I hadn't got the background and support of all these different people that have worked with me and supported me, then I wouldn't have been able to do any of those things. But I think it's about a growth mindset, and being future facing and being open to change and not being afraid of it. And that's partly what made me write the book, and it's partly what has informed so much of my wider career. But again, it comes from having great mentors, great teachers, and great allies that can help you along the way as well.
And what is that motivating thing which is making you do things, all the things that you're doing, like wake up in the morning every day?
Do you know, that's a really interesting question, and the reason I'm smiling is because I've had a number of senior leadership roles in my career, and when I was appointed to one of them, part of the induction process was they psychologically assessed me, and they did like a psychological profile of me. And when the specialist who did this was giving me the feedback, she sat me down and she started giving me this feedback in a way that I wasn't expecting. Because what she said to me was, she said, "Have you ever had a near-death experience?" And I said, "What are you asking me that for?" And she said, "Because your motivational profile is extremely unusual, and it's usually," she said she'd only ever seen it twice in her career at a similar profile, and in both of the other cases, the individuals had nearly died for various reasons. So I said, no, no, I haven't had a near-death experience, but I've always had an incredibly high level of motivation. Now, part of it comes from the fact that when I was a teenager, I was dating a girl who used to work in a nursing home looking after old people. And I used to go along and I used to listen to them. And I remember being really influenced by them, because when I listened to them, some of them had regrets, some of them had a lot of advice to offer. And I absorbed all this advice, and there were some really common themes about living in the present moment and not living your life to please other people. And if there's something you want to do, just go and do it, because most fears are perceived, they're not real. So just go and do it anyway, because you're going to die anyway one day, right? And they told me all this stuff, and I was a young man, I was a teenager, and I was like, this is awesome. And you know, it affected my whole life, even to the current day. I get up every day and I still have that in my mind. And I think, if this is the last day I've got, what am I going to do with it? And by living that way, it means that when things go wrong, as they always do in business, and when conflicts happen with people, as they always do, because people are always sometimes running into conflict with each other, it means what I have is this very different perspective on it, where I don't get, these things don't bother me in the way that they seem to bother a lot of people. And I think it's because if you can see the bigger picture, and if you can, make the most of the present moment, but also project forward to like a future position where you think, well, will this really matter 10 years from now? Then I think it helps you to put things in perspective, and I think it's a really good philosophy on life. And it's also why my alarm clock every morning plays Nickelback's If Today Was Your Last Day.
So it's unusual to be multi-skilled and being in multi position. So how did you manage to do that, and how you develop this kind of a personality, and what kind of influences that you have or had which made you to be what you are today?
Yeah, well, I've had some great coaches, as I mentioned earlier. So I've had some amazing people mentor me and train me and coach me. One of them, sadly, we lost earlier this year. He was a very, very special, dear friend and a remarkable individual called David Price. And David was given an OBE by Her Late Majesty the Queen of England for services to education. Now, the reason I mentioned David is because one of the many things I learned from him was he had this incredible capacity to take a multidisciplinary perspective of any given situation, problem, or opportunity. Which not everybody does. Most people tend to look at life through their specialist discipline. So if I'm a engineering academic, I'll look at the world through engineering. If I'm a surgeon, I'll always tell you've got to have an operation, that kind of thing. Whereas what I got from David was this ability to take all of these different variables into account. And in education, of course, how you apply this is a thing called project-based learning, because you can take a project that requires multiple different disciplines and perspectives, and you bring it all together as a team to get a better result. They're very good at doing this in Finland and some of the Nordic countries across Europe. And they're very good at it in Australia, I think, as well. We don't do so much of it in England, sadly, but I think we need to do more of it. So because I've been lucky enough to have these sort of mentors and coaches in my life, they've given me this different way of seeing things, and I've applied that in my business life as well. So whenever I'm faced with a business problem, often I will bring people together from very different teams and very different perspectives and backgrounds to try and solve a problem. And it tends to work out better because you're getting a diversity of thinking and a diversity of perspectives. And the more diverse your teams are, the better the results. Because otherwise you get groupthink and you get unconscious bias and you get lots of other things that lead to not such good decisions being made. So the more diverse the team is, the better, I think.
And these achievements that you have, already with the decision-making power that you earned. So, what is that thing which is that quality which is giving you, the maximum percentage of success?
Yeah, it's a good question, that one, and a complex question. Again, I was told by a headhunting specialist years ago who recruits senior executives for positions. He told me that I always needed to be in a role where I could make a small number of very big decisions. And I'm very, very comfortable in that space. I've always been very comfortable making big decisions and being accountable for it. I get somewhat less interested in making lots of little decisions. So when it comes to really big things, that's what I like to do. And that's what I've always done that. Like even back in 2007 when the banking crisis hit, that's when I made quite a lot of money off the stock market. And that involved me making quite a small number of very big decisions, which involved me putting a lot of money into just a couple of very big decisions that could have gone horribly wrong and I could have lost all my money, but they went right. And I think one of the things that helps me to do that is, again, I've been trained by some very talented people to remain calm and rational when other people aren't. So when there is a problem of one kind or another, most people, they panic, their anxiety levels go up, and that starts to affect their decision-making processes. And in those situations, people often, even very experienced executives, will often make less than great decisions because they start to go back to what they know and familiar things rather than objectively assessing the situation. So I have an ability not to panic and to make big decisions in very complex situations that might be very uncertain. And that's probably why I'm quite good at investing. I've learned this from lots of different sources, by the way, because I had the good fortune to be in America and I visited NASA. And I had the good fortune to meet somebody who trains astronauts. And I said, tell me about it. I'm fascinated by that. And he told me that the first thing you have to learn as an astronaut is that you're in the most dangerous situation a human being can ever be in, because everything when you're in space is trying to kill you. The environment is dangerous. The technology can go wrong. Everything is deadly. And when things go wrong, the first thing you've got to do is not panic. And the way that they train the astronauts to do it is to ask themselves the question, before I do what I'm about to do I think that might make this situation worse? Now, how I apply that in business to great effect is that whenever you're faced with a decision in business, whether it's a small one or a big one, how I interpret that is just ask yourself, what might the unintended consequences of my decision be? Now, if you think about it, how many things do you see go wrong on the news or in the media where if the person involved with it had just stopped to ask the question, what might the unintended consequences of this action be, it probably would have worked out a lot better. And I don't think enough people do it, especially not politicians, but that's another matter. So that's kind of how I approach those lessons in business that serve me well. And it enables me to deal with very, very complicated scenarios.
So I can understand with you're saying you are not just educated, you're intelligent as well. The combination.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether I'm intelligent. Do you know, the older I get, the more questions I have, and the less certain I am of everything. So, I think when it comes to, I think the concept of intelligence is actually a very complicated one because I'm a big believer that there are many, many ways of defining intelligence. Um, there's an academic way of defining intelligence, of course, but there's also a whole range of things like emotional intelligence and a creative intelligence and a whole range of other things that I think define different types of intelligence. What I've always found is, going back to my earlier point, is I've always surrounded myself with people that I'm interested in, that I can learn from. I mean, you're an example of this. So, I mean, in this session, you're asking me all these questions. I actually want to be asking you all a load of questions, but I know that's not the format of your show. Because I would become the interviewer. But I'm actually really more interested in you, than talking about myself, because I can learn from you. You've met and talked to some fascinating people. I'd love to know more about your background. I'd love to know more about what motivates you to do what you do, because I think you're a very interesting person, and I think you're doing some great stuff. And even in this session now, I can sort of see a warmth in your personality that comes through the screen. And I think you're probably one of life's natural connectors and networkers that connects people, and then extraordinary things tend to happen, because that's certainly been true of my journey. And so yeah, I think if you bring all those things together, then good stuff happens.
So how many subjects that you have studied in your entire life, in order to
Yeah.
be successful in all these roles?
So for me, my original degree was actually in literature. And it was in literature because I was fascinated by it. And that gave me a whole range of skills, which included creativity. It nurtured my creativity. It enabled me to write and communicate in a particular way. And then I went back and did my master's degree in business. Now, that was probably the most important qualification that I've ever done, because the master's degree in business, the MBA, gave me all of these business skills that have been essential to me on my journey, because I've studied master's level marketing, master's level operations, master's level technology, master's level strategy, and all these other things. I've even done quantitative modeling at master's level for business, so quantitative mathematics at master's level. Now, what that gives me is, firstly, the professor that taught me on that course, he said to me, well, ultimately, Jamie, what this will mean is that no one can lie to you in business. So I've been in a boardroom many, many times, and if somebody is trying to put across a view that may not be factually correct in a boardroom, they're not going to get past me. I'm always constructive and as positive as I can be, but sometimes I have to challenge people when they're presenting something which is simply not correct, or at least can be challenged. So you get all of these skills, and I think that the business skills have been the most important because it covers so many aspects of life. Communication skills, leadership, management, budgeting, finance. You've got to know your way around numbers, or you're going to just really struggle in business. And of course, I've always combined this with my interest in technology as well. So that's sort of been a twin thing that's all come together. But my interest in business was really driven by an interest in people. So I was fascinated by why some organizations succeed and why do some people succeed and others don't. And that's been my lifelong study. I've been fascinated by all of that. That's why I've got a fascination with organizational culture, because I believe if you get the culture right in an organization, and culture is not an abstract concept, it's something that can be codified and actually structured in a business plan sense. I think if you get the structure right, the culture right in your organization, then you start to outperform comparable organizations. For example, if you take one of my companies, we outperform companies that are about 5 times our size. And the reason for that is the people and the culture. So if you look after people and you inspire them and you motivate them and you give them all the right tools to be successful, then funnily enough, they do well. Too many organizations don't treat their people in the right way, and that's where it goes wrong. So I would say those are the key skills that have enabled me to be successful. Education, firstly education, and secondly the subjects I happened to study on my journey was mainly business. So economics, finance, strategy, all that sort of stuff. It's much more interesting than I've made it sound.
So real-time problems are interacting with businesses or leaders or who are involved in the business. So how is that, and how you are able to be a good people's person?
So again, for me, to take the last part of your point there about how am I able to be a good people person, so to speak, that comes down to the luck I've had with some of the mentors I've had who have been extraordinary people. So I've had the good fortune to firstly work with some amazing people in my career. I've learned from them and I've absorbed their sort of way of doing things, and I've adapted that to my own style. I do believe in a very collaborative kind of approach to leadership. I also believe that people don't work for anybody, they work for themselves. But what you need to do is find people who have a common purpose. So, for example, all of the people in all of my companies have a common purpose. So technically they might work for me, but in reality, I would say they don't. It's just a group of people with different roles on the same mission. Ultimately, the responsibility stops with me in the case of if I'm a director or if I'm the chairman of the company. So ultimately, I'm the top accounting person who's ultimately accountable for everything. But in reality, we're all just a group of people, like a common tribe with a common purpose. We're all passionate about technology, or we're all passionate about artificial intelligence or transformation, whatever it might be. And that's what we do. And so I think if you find people who have a common purpose but are all diverse as well, so diverse in every sense, then I think you've got a team that can achieve extraordinary things. And that old phrase about a small number of people is all you need to change the world is actually really true. I've seen it firsthand. Um, in fact, the most high performing, most agile, most successful organizations that I know of are relatively small. It's a small group of people, but with disproportionate impact. Certainly, that's something that I've seen around me. And if I have any particular talent at all, I would say it is the ability to see potential in people and to bring a group of people together where the dynamics really work and that team performs spectacularly. That is my particular skill. So that's a joy to see. You know, I've worked with many people and mentored them and coached them and gone on to see them to do extraordinary things. And that for me is a fantastic thing to be part of.
You have been the evidence of the evolution of technology because you have been seeing from long time, and also you are seeing the constant change that is happening in the world. So, what do you say about the connection between human and technology?
That's a really nice way of saying that I'm quite old. Yeah, I remember when the internet came around in the 90s, so 1991 onwards. And the interesting thing for me about technology is that somebody very clever said that in the short term, we tend to overestimate the impact of technology, and in the long term, we tend to underestimate the impact of technology. And in my journey, I believe that to be true. Now, I think we're getting to a really interesting point right now where we are here today, because of course we have artificial intelligence coming along, which is really disrupting and shaping and transforming our world completely. And I think what's happening right now is that there's a lot of overestimation about its impact in the short term, but I don't think many people are really accurately estimating its impact in the long term. And my optics are in the long term. I'm looking 10, 15, 20 years down the road, and I'm thinking, where are we going to be? Because that's where I'm going to put my money and my investments and where my thinking is. And also, it just interests me anyway. I'm just fascinated by it. So I think that the technology will increasingly impact on our lives at an exponential rate. So if we think change is happening fast now, just bear in mind that this is as slow as it's ever going to be. So from this point forward, it just gets faster. And I think for me, that's exciting because I like disruptive things and I thrive in that kind of environment. But equally, I think we have a responsibility to help everyone in society globally to lift them up so that all the boats rise together. And I think the only way we're going to do that is by supporting people and training them and helping them, because there's going to be a lot of unintended consequences from this disruption. There will be unintended consequences for certain groups in society. Some countries will also be disproportionately affected. So I think we can anticipate some of these things, and I think we need to make sure that everyone gets the best chance to use these amazing technologies that we're going to have to make the most of their lives and to lead happy, healthy, productive lives that have meaning. And the only way we'll do that goes right back to education, funnily enough, you see. So this is why that statement is absolutely true, that education is the most powerful force for changing the world, because the only way the human race gets better and smarter and we all have a better world and a better future together is if we all across the world lift ourselves up with education. Now, different countries do it differently, obviously, and there's a lot of problems with education globally, and that's a whole other topic. But I think if we get that right, then the fusion of people and technology coming together could be the most exciting time in all of human history, because I think artificial intelligence is going to help us to develop new materials, accelerate research and innovation, and discover things that were not possible otherwise. But another thing that I'm really excited about is I think that technology can be a really powerful force for widening access and participation in education as well. And I know that from my own direct personal experience, because I've been very involved with that for many, many years. And so for me, I think it could be an equalizing force in the world to create a more equitable world if we get it right. We have the ability to, we have the talents to, we just need to make sure that our leaders in all different walks of life make sure that that happens. And again, there's some amazing people doing amazing things that I know of globally on that agenda. So I'm optimistic about the future. But for those people who are afraid of change, I think we need to help them. And by the way, we're all afraid of change. I just want to make that point. So it's not that I'm not afraid of change. We're all afraid of change to a certain extent, because that's what's kept us alive in terms of evolution. You know, if people weren't afraid of things they hadn't seen before, then none of us would be here, because we'd have eaten that red mushroom in the forest. You know what I mean? So everyone's afraid of change to a certain extent, but I think we have to give everyone the coaching, the education, the training and the support, so that collectively across the whole world we can make the most of these amazing opportunities that we have with technology. And if we get that right, the human race has an amazing future.
Is that the diversified people that you have worked with, and the different kinds of thought processes that that you have interacted with, is that the reason why you are being very successful in making your decisions today, and you're telling the world the same to be?
Yeah, 100%. So I've been very lucky to learn from others. So it's not that I naturally had any particular talent at all. I basically absorb great influences from really intelligent, talented people. And there's one gentleman who was who is still a great influence on me. Actually, he's a good friend these days. He was once my boss, and he was also a chief executive of a very good college, and he has a real talent for the dynamics of people. And one of the many things I've learned from him is he was very aware of unconscious bias in boardrooms and how people can influence each other, good and bad, in a leadership situation. And he gave me some real insights in how to avoid surrounding yourself with people who are just like you, because that's the first mistake that a lot of leaders make. A lot of leaders have very fragile egos as well. Now, ironically, sometimes that is what drives their success. But the downside of having a fragile ego as a leader is that sometimes they tend to recruit people who are just going to support their ego. And I learned a long time ago to do the exact opposite. I've surrounded myself with people who challenge me. They have very different views. Um, but if you get the dynamics in that right, so that everybody treats everybody with dignity and respect at all times, then you can get some amazing impact. And that's what I learned from the gentleman I was referring to, because what he did in his boardroom is he'd have all these really strong directors from all different backgrounds and experience and with different perspectives, and he would allow them all to say their bit. So I would make a contribution, some other people would make a contribution. We would all have different perspectives, and he'd sit there and he'd be quiet and he'd say the least in the boardroom. And at the end of listening to a debate, he'd look at everyone and say, "Thank you for everyone's contribution. It's been incredibly valuable, and here's what my decision is and what we're going to do." And it sounds simple, but because he did it that way, everybody around the boardroom backed him, because we'd all had the opportunity to be genuinely part of co-creating the decision. And getting that culture right and that decision-making process right is quite a skill. And I see this going wrong in many, many boardrooms that I'm in across the world. I see leaders dominating the conversation, and then a couple of voices around a boardroom reinforce it, and most of the boardrooms sitting there thinking, "Oh, this is going to be a disaster." And so, I think board, and it doesn't have to be a boardroom. It's any team dynamic is the same thing. So I think the dynamics of people is a fascinating thing, and if you get it right, you only need a small number of people to do extraordinary things.
Since you have mentioned the future technology, like after 15 or 20 years, how it is going to be and how you are expecting that is going to be. Uh, so, uh, Today, because of the internet, the world is interconnected. The countries are talking with each other, and technology have been made people to, share information in fraction of seconds. You saw, the evolution of technology.
Yeah.
So, this collection of diversified people who are coming from completely different parts of the world, and what that, the product or the service is going to be for the humanity and whole planet in future.
Yeah, so I think in many ways we're going to go back to the future. And what I mean by that is I think there are some principles that we've sort of lost along the way that will come back, especially around sustainability. And where I think we'll get to is I think there'll be a lot of change. So I think we'll all be living in a much more sustainable way that's much more in harmony with this planet, because even though Elon Musk has a big ambition to get off this planet, I think for most of us we're going to be stuck on it for a while. And so I think we all have to learn how to make the most of that and to live in harmony with the planet. And I think whether it's a business or a technology or even how we live on a personal level, we're going to have to live in a more sustainable way. And it's going to mean different things for different people. But I think technology in all of its forms, but in particular artificial intelligence and automation and robotics and other types of engineering, um, it's going to have all manner of benefits for society, because frankly, I don't think we've got a choice, if I'm being honest about it. I think we're facing a climate emergency. Um, I have a huge amount of sympathy for climate scientists, because for about 30 years they've been going, "Excuse me, we're all going to die if we don't actually do this thing differently." And because they're scientists, no one's actually been really particularly listening to them, because it's an inconvenient truth. Now, what they've been saying for decades is all now starting to happen, and I see this as I travel across the world. I mean, I was in a part of the world not long ago where I'd visited it 10 years previously, and there was a big glacier there, and now it's gone. And the world is literally changing before our eyes. Now, I think the great thing about human beings is that we're at our best when we're up against it, when we're under tremendous pressure, right? I'll give you an example, the pandemic. Now, up until the pandemic, it didn't seem to occur to thousands of very intelligent executives across the world that they could have a video call. Let's get in our cars and drive to a meeting. This is literally what we were doing just a few years ago, right? So this isn't ancient history. This is just a few years ago. And I have personal experience of some senior leaders who are very intelligent people in so many ways, being faced with either potential death from a virus that at the time was very scary for a lot of people, or arrest in the UK because there were certain rules brought in about lockdown and we all had to not travel to certain places. And it took that to force them to go, do you know what? I think we can use this technology to meet instead of actually getting everyone to travel to this office. And I find this incredible because if ever you want an example of how difficult human beings find change, then the COVID pandemic was it. But the positive side of it is that just look at what happened. So across China, there's a very famous photograph that NASA took of China during the pandemic. And there's a time lapse of about 3 months or thereabouts. And what it shows is all of the carbon emissions and pollutants in the atmosphere in the space of 3 months pretty much disappeared. Because everybody wasn't traveling, the factories weren't working in the same way, and the environment started to recover very, very quickly. And so I think that if we really collectively decided as a human race to go, we are going to sort this out, then we can. The question is whether the collective will is there and whether we're actually going to do it. But I think human beings are best under pressure. And when we are challenged, it's amazing how tough human beings can be. And it's amazing what we can achieve together if we really have to. I do sometimes wonder what the human race might achieve if we were faced with a global, like a massive global threat, like a meteor. Because I actually think you would see human beings at their very best in all of human history. I think all of our differences would fall away. And I think we would align with a common purpose. And I think human beings are best at that, which goes back to the earlier conversation about organization culture and leadership, because if you find people with a common purpose and a common tribe, if you like, they can achieve extraordinary things. So yeah, I think under pressure we're surprisingly innovative, and I think the climate crisis is providing an element of that pressure. So when I look down the road to the future, I think technology is going to play an ever increasing part in our lives. I think it can create a more equitable and fair world. I think it's going to transform education, and already is. But I think we need to look in the long term, not get caught up in short term disruption like, oh, is ChatGPT good for assessments or bad for assessments and things? I don't think that's the question. I think there's much bigger questions about what are we assessing and why, and what is education for? And these are some much bigger questions that I hope we can shape in the future to create a much better system for everybody.
As a leader, what do you say to the leaders that who will be listening and watching you from anywhere on this planet? That will make everybody to come together, to come for a purpose and create a positive thing, and what kind of a mindset that will make them to come together.
I think the mindset needs to be. I once saw a speech that former President Barack Obama was giving, and I think somebody in the audience had asked him something like, "How difficult did you find it when you were no longer going to be president anymore?" And his answer was something like, "Oh, it wasn't difficult because it was never mine to give away." And I thought, wow, what a statement to make. What he was saying was that if you find yourself in an extraordinary position, whatever it might be, of authority or leadership or whatever it might be, you are a temporary custodian of that title and that role. It's not you, it's not yours, you are a temporary custodian of it. And that's the way that I've always viewed everything I've ever done. Because one day I won't be doing it. And somebody else will be doing whatever it is. And as a custodian of whatever it is you're doing, if you view it in that way, it gives you a different perspective on it. And I would encourage leaders to see themselves as temporary custodians of whatever title it is they've got, because that's what they are. I would also, not in a negative way, but in a positive way, remind people that we're all going to die, so we may as well think about our legacy and what do we want that to be. And in business, I think the best legacy that you can possibly have is to create as many opportunities for other people as you possibly can. And sometimes that might be a job, or it might be connecting them to something else or somebody else. It could be supporting them through something. So I support a whole bunch of other entrepreneurs, and they support me as well. Because anyone who's ever been an entrepreneur and started anything, and you can probably relate to this, I'm sure, on your own journey, you'll have days when everything goes wrong. And when everything goes wrong, sometimes you just need to pick up the phone and speak to someone who has been through the same storm. And they'll go, oh yeah, I've been through that, but you'll come out the other side and hear some advice. And so our networks and our connections are everything. And I think the more connected we are and the more friends we have, and I extend the hand of friendship and collaboration to anybody who wants to take it, then I think the more enriched our lives become and the better we all are. So I would encourage leaders to think of themselves as temporary custodians. I would encourage them to think more in that way. And then I think hopefully our world of organizations gets better, hopefully.
Being a businessman, so what you have understood all these years?
Yeah, so I think the main lessons I would share from my leadership journey would be, I would say, to be compassionate. I think empathy is a particularly advanced form of intelligence. I have learned a lot from some people who are some of the most compassionate people in the world who have a huge amount of empathy. I think the power of listening is immense. So even though we're in this conversation now and you're asking me loads of questions, I would much rather be listening to you. Because I can't learn anything when I'm talking, okay? So I'm usually deliberately try to be the quietest person in the room. And that's because I'd rather listen than talk. Because when you do that, you're absorbing knowledge and information from other people. And I would like to know more about your motivations, your journey, your hopes, your fears, what makes you tick, what you want to do. That's what's interesting to me. And so those are the kind of things that in leadership I think really, really matter. And also you've got to do a couple of things as well as a leader. Firstly, you've got to make people feel safe. If you're in a leadership position, it doesn't matter whether you've got a small team or thousands of people. They've got to feel safe under your leadership and your command. And there's a particular way of doing that. I believe being open and being radically transparent is important, but you've also got to lead by example. So, for example, I'm very passionate about creating a smarter and more sustainable world. Now, that wouldn't work if I had a private jet plane. Because I could hardly say to you or to anybody else, oh, sustainability really matters, and I like planting trees, and I believe we should all live sustainably. Anyway, I'll see you again. I've just got to jump in my own jet, right? That wouldn't work, because people would look at me and go, this guy's just full of nonsense, because he says we should all live more sustainably, but he's got a private jet. So I believe leaders have to be authentic. Now that means, being open about mistakes we make. So I'm very open about mistakes I make. And I'm glad to say I still make plenty of mistakes. And that's important, because if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning anything. Many leaders are afraid to make mistakes because of lots of implications that can happen with certain mistakes. But I believe that you can never be critical of someone for making a mistake if they had the best intentions with what they were doing. Now, some people will make mistakes because it's a bad error of judgment and they knew they shouldn't have done something, and that's a different matter. But if you make a mistake because you thought it was going to work out well and you had the best interests at heart for what you were doing, well, that's just innovation. Because innovation requires experimentation, which means uncertain outcomes. So things are going to go wrong. And I'm often around leaders who are quite prepared for things to go wrong because they're innovative. So I think leaders have to bring all these things together to create extraordinary people who can do extraordinary things. So you've got to make people feel safe. And then in that safety, they've got to feel safe to innovate as well. So everyone who works around me knows that it's okay when things go wrong, because that's life, and I get things wrong and go wrong for me too. But then when things do go wrong, it's how you work together as a team to help each other. And I think if you get that right, you've got a really powerful force for change and to do some good in the world. Me personally, I would say it's different from one person to another, but for me personally, the only legacy worth having in this life when I finally depart this world I would hope that I helped a certain number of people and that had some impact. I have no interest in how much money I accrue or how flashy my car is or anything like that. I have had those things and I've had some very flashy cars and all that sort of stuff. But they don't mean anything to me. People are my number one priority, and I'm much more interested. Nothing gives me more joy than when I see people flourishing and doing well. I recently recruited a young gentleman from Staffordshire University. He was a young chap called Subhan. It's his first ever job, and within the first month of him joining our business, he was in the boardroom of Google's headquarters in London. And over lunch, I saw him looking around with his eyes wide at the building, because Google's buildings are like really cool and very creative and almost like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "I've never even seen a building like this. It's just incredible." And he had this sense of wonder. And for me, that was just magical, because I was looking at him thinking, "Oh, I'm so proud of you. This is awesome." And I'm so proud of the people that work with me, because they're amazing people and they do amazing things. And my role is just to believe in them, look after them, support them, and help them to do things that they didn't think they could do.
So the greatest quality that that I have observed is like you are non-materialistic and you're more into valuing humans and people. So how that quality that came, like from the education that you got, or actually being in the real world and watching and observing everything.
Yeah, so I would say the main thing that has given me that perspective is not necessarily anything in formal education or training or business that I've done. It's simply listening to older people. Now, one of the things that I think the UK and the West gets wrong is that as people get older, we don't seem to value them as much. Whereas when I look at the eastern part of the world, so when we go east towards whether it's India or China or somewhere like that, it seems to me that culturally those societies appreciate people as they age, as they get older. They value their wisdom and their insights and experience. I saw that probably in you, actually, with why you had your mother on your channel sharing her views on different things, and I thought, how wonderful is that? So I think, to answer your question, if I listen, as I do and have always done, to older people who have more wisdom and experience than me, it's fascinating what they can tell you and teach you about what really matters in life. And the key point is that you can accrue huge wealth and you can accrue all these things that are nice to have. And I do understand the appeal of that, because it's always nice to have a nice house, a nice car, or whatever it might be. But you can't take any of that stuff with you. Now, at the start of this conversation, I mentioned a really special person to me, a gentleman called David Price. And a short time ago, we both lost someone who meant a lot to both of us. Now, he was a gentleman who was actually a personal friend of my friend David, and he's a well-known figure in the world of education. His name was Sir Ken Robinson. And, of course, Sir Ken Robinson has done the most watched TED Talk in all of time with his talk about do schools kill creativity. And Sir Ken was my friend David's mentor, so he taught David lots, and they were close personal friends. And when Sir Ken Robinson died, obviously that was devastating for a lot of people, including my friend David. But David came out with this quote, and his quote was, "What we do for ourselves dies with us, but what we do for others lives on." That's my eulogy. That's what I want my eulogy to be, because that's how I live my life. I could spend my time trying to do a load of business deals and make loads of money myself, and I'm very good at that. And I do that for other people, though. So my motivation is, if I can do a deal there that is really successful, I can take that resource and do some real good in the world over here. So that's how I operate. I believe that what we do for other people is the only thing that can live on, and that really should be what our focus in life is about. And to answer your question, to conclude, you get that if you listen to older people And especially if you listen to people who might not have long to live. So if you happen to be talking to somebody who might be fighting a life-limiting illness, for example, they will never talk to you about how big their house is, how flashy their car is, or how much money they made, because none of it matters. I mean, I don't know if you saw the speech that the late Steve Jobs gave to a bunch of university graduates when he said he'd been first diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And he said, faced with my imminent mortality, everything falls away. Everything. Right? You could be the chief executive of Apple, but if somebody says to you, I'm sorry, you've got a matter of 3 months to live, suddenly being the chief executive of Apple does not matter. A whole bunch of other things matter. So I guess my answer is, and my point is that we should really focus on the present moment and what really matters to us. And I think that's people looking after each other, helping each other, because we're all stuck on this same rock together. So let's help each other to have a happy, healthy, productive life. And I think if we do that, we can all rise.
So I connected to what you have said because my mother is a cancer patient and she's in a fourth stage, and I do interaction and I know what kind
Yeah,
of conversations that will be between me and her, like nothing about the positions or any other materialistic
100%.
things, something
100%. And
completely different.
I hope, I'm sorry to hear that as well. And I hope that, I hope she does as well as she can with that, because that's a tough journey.
I hope your words will add value to her her life. So what you want to say to the planet, like who are listening and seeing this?
I think, here's what I would say to answer that one is that, one of my favorite quotes is from John Lennon from the Beatles. John Lennon wrote my all-time favorite song, which is Imagine. And, when he was a kid, his teacher sort of set him an assignment once, which was to go away and write, his view on, what the purpose of life was. And he sort of famously failed the assignment because he just wrote one word on a piece of paper, and he said happiness. And the teacher said, John, you were supposed to write 2 pages. I don't think you understood the assignment. And he replied, I don't think you understand life. And I sort of love that because, I personally believe happiness comes from the combination of doing something that has purpose and meaning to you. And if you do something every day that has purpose and meaning, whatever that is, I think happiness is a byproduct. And I think where most people go wrong in pursuit of happiness is they think that happiness is a thing that they are targeting. Like, I can find happiness. I'm looking for happiness. That's not how it works. Happiness isn't a thing. It's a byproduct of something else. And it's a byproduct of doing something that has meaning and purpose that you value yourself, whatever that might be. It might be helping somebody out. It might be volunteering. It might be employing somebody. It might be whatever it is. But if you combine purpose and meaning, then you get the happiness as a side thing. So I think, that is kind of what I would encourage people to think about and to do. And it's different from one person to another because we'll all have our own ways of deciding what has meaning to us and what has purpose. For me, it's education. So as long as I'm breathing on this planet, I will always be doing something around education, either directly in education or helping it in some way or another. I'm a huge advocate for that. I don't believe there is any other thing we have as human beings that will give us anything better for our global collective future than education. So I think it's our greatest hope together. So that would be how I'd answer that.
So one last thing that will be extremely valuable. If you are the ambassador and representative of this planet, and if others, if there are other species on other planets or other parts of the universe, if this video is saved or this audio is saved, and if they found it and they are hearing you, do you have something to say about the planet? that that you'd
Yeah,
lived
I
on
mean,
and
that's a brilliant question, and I think if this was seen by an alien species on another planet, my first question is, can I have a lift? Because I'd like to see the rest of the universe. I have always, even when I was a little boy, I've always looked at the night sky with a sense of wonder and a sense of awe, because I've always wondered about what's out there and how other civilizations might view us. And bizarrely, I've always looked at the human race almost as if I'm not part of it, as if I'm looking down like an alien would look at the Earth. And I think that if you do that, it gives you a very different perspective on life. There is, just to go back to astronauts and NASA again, the astronauts have a particular phrase that I can't remember what the exact phrase is, but basically there's an effect that happens to astronauts when they go up into space for the first time. And for a lot of people, the first time they see the Earth as a big, blue globe from space, it creates this sense of awe where suddenly people look at us all and go, wow, we're all literally on the same rock together. And it gives you this different perspective that squabbles and conflict and differences between humans on Earth is quite ridiculous when you think about it. I mean, you imagine looking at the Earth as an alien from outer space, and you're talking to your alien friend next to you and you're saying, why are they fighting with those guys there on that other part of that rock? Oh yeah, well they've got a disagreement, and the other alien would say, yeah, but they've got to live together on the same rock. And so I think if we all had a little bit of a different perspective on our place in the universe and on our place on this planet, I think we'd see things differently. And I also think that an alien species would see us as probably quite basic, because I don't think we're particularly as intelligent as we like to think we are. And my evidence for that is that we eat things that can kill us, we drink things that kill us, and we pollute our own air that we breathe, which, if you think about it, again, if you imagine how that looks to an alien species, be two aliens talking to each other, and one says, oh, they're not very clever, are they? I mean, did no one tell them that they're polluting their own air that they're breathing? And the other alien would say, oh, no, they know about that. No, then they know. And the other alien would look completely confused, like, what? So they know about all these problems and they're still doing it. Yeah, they're not quite as advanced as they think. So I think an alien species would hopefully be far more advanced, but probably see us as quite magical creatures who are quite tough when we're under pressure. And I think that there is something about the human spirit that crosses the entire planet. I spend a lot of time in airports, for example, and when I'm in airports, I'm always observing human behavior and looking around, and I see people hugging each other, saying goodbye, welcoming family members back with signs and things, and they can't wait to see each other again. And I think that there's more that we have in common across the entire human race than the differences or anything that divides us. And so maybe I'm an optimist, but I do believe that people are fundamentally good the world over. And I think that's the best legacy we can all create together, is that if we help each other and look after each other, then I think that's a life that's had purpose and meaning, and that can't be bad. And if we leave this planet a little tiny bit better than how we found it, then we've done okay.
great message. And at last, what's your observation about my work? You have seen my work.
I love your work because, as I say, I think you're a natural connector, and I think you ask really interesting questions, and I think you get some really interesting people to talk to as well on your channels. I don't know how you have the energy to do it, because you have so many different channels and so many different social channels, and that takes a lot of work. So you must work very hard to do it all. But I think you're awesome, and I think you do great work. And if there's anything I can do to help you going ahead, then I'm happy to do so. And again, thanks for inviting me on as well, because I'm sorry it's taken so long, but busy schedules kind of got in the way. But it's certainly been a great conversation, and I very, very much appreciate it.
I have done masters in software engineering, also bachelors in computer science and engineering. Right now, I'm working for a London company remotely from India as a DevOps engineer. So that's my full-time role. Apart from that, I'm interviewing experts like you who are already in the industry and who are already, solving different kind of business problems, and also, who are from different industries, and, who are from different parts of the world, like psychologists, doctors, police officers, authors. like completely different individuals who are coming from completely different professions and different age groups. So, leaving my professional work, actually the technology engineering work, I'm doing this project. I also interviewed a couple of experts from NASA in order to understand the space technology, like what kind of things they are doing. So, how this collection of knowledge, like talking with experienced and smart people like you, how that is going to add value to me and going to help me in future.
Do you know, I think that the more connected we are, the stronger we are, and the more opportunities we have. So I think this is something that you do particularly well, obviously, because you connect to people and you make those connections. And once you've connected to those people, you know them, and if you get a network of influential people and connected people together in your network, that will transform your life in so many ways. I'll give you an example. Years and years and years ago, when LinkedIn first started, I thought, this is great. A new technology, let me play with it, let me have a go. So I set myself up on LinkedIn quite quickly, and I started to look at who was on there, and then I started to think to myself, well, there's some really influential business leaders on here. I wonder if I could connect to them. And so I believe there was a particular way of connecting to people who were very busy. So in my case, I thought, well, I'll recognize how busy they are and how important they are, so they might not get a chance to respond to me. But I wrote to one lady who at the time was the vice president of IBM, and she's a wonderful lady called Sandy Carter. And I wrote to her, and I remember saying to her, I've just read your book that you've published, because she wrote this book called Get Bold, and it was all about how she believes social media was going to be a really powerful thing. And this was, of course, back when social media was just starting. And so this book, Get Bold, I'd read it and I thought, yeah, I totally get this. This lady has got this vision of the future that I think is going to happen. So I wrote to her and said, Sandy, I hope you don't mind me reaching out to you. You don't know me. I live in England and you're in America. But if you're ever over in England at any point and I can have just 5 minutes of your time, I would love to ask you a couple of questions, because I think I could learn a tremendous amount from you. And to my absolute surprise, I got this note back the following day from Sandy saying, well, actually, I'm flying into London tomorrow, and if you can meet me at the Savoy, I'll have a chat with you over lunch. And this sent me into a total panic, because firstly, I was thinking, I'm not sure if I'm posh enough to get into the Savoy. They're going to stop me at the door. What do I wear to get into this? Because this is one of London's top destinations. So anyway, they let me in. And she came walking through, and I can still picture it as if it was yesterday. She comes walking with her hand stretched out to shake it, and she's got an entourage around her. There's about 10 people around her, because she was a very powerful business lady. In fact, she was one of the top 10 most influential female business leaders at that time in the world. And she's still right up there now. And she gave me about an hour of her time, and I just listened to her. I asked her these questions. I remember asking her one particular question, which was, IBM has hundreds of thousands of staff, and you're right at the top of this particular bit of it. How do you cause change to happen in an organization that's so big? And she said to me, just always remember, Jamie, that old quote that's, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And of course, what she was referring to, and that quote, I think, was from Peter Drucker. And the quote, of course, is true, because it goes back to my earlier points about it's all about people. You can have the best business plan in the world, but if you can't get people to buy into it and believe in it and follow you into that vision, then your business plan is worth nothing. And that's a really powerful lesson, is that it is all about people. And that goes back to your earlier questions about authentic leadership and how people are successful. And I think you can only really be successful if people want to work for you, not because you tell them to.
That's great. Can I put this video on my YouTube channel with your permission?
You absolutely can put it anywhere that you wish to, with my permission. Absolutely. It's been a real privilege to have a chat and a catch up.
Yeah, and can I also put this on audio and video clip on my podcast website, internet, social media, everywhere with your permission?
Yeah, of course you can. Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
Thank you again, Jamie, for your valuable time and sharing your, valuable, answers to my audience.
No, it's been an absolute privilege. I feel like I've made a new friend today, so I always enjoy that. And it's been wonderful to have a conversation with you. I hope we get to have another conversation again soon. And I do wish you all the best. And if I can help you in any way, absolutely happy to.
It's an honor, sir. Thank you very much again. Take
No, the
care.
honor's mine. Thank you. Take care. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.